Good morning. It's always healthy when you hear a lot of talking and laughter. I'm Freeman Rabowski, and I'm delighted to welcome you to UMBC. If you could take your seats. This is the first of 4 workshops that the White House Office of Science and Technology is hosting, and we're delighted to be hosting with them here. Focused on undergrad STEM education as a part of the President's College Opportunity Initiative. And what is very exciting is that we have a range of people from different universities here in our state, but beyond, well beyond, and people are focused on this notion of undergraduate STEM education. Today, I'm first introducing the person who will be facilitating the conversation in the meetings all day. Dr. Peter Henderson joined us here at UMBC about a year ago from the National Academies, where he had served as director of the Academy's Board on Higher Education and Workforce. He also directed studies in higher ed and science and technology policy. Among his most recent studies were, first of all, the most recent, the Research Universities and the Future of America. Secondly, the study on expanding underrepresented minority participation, and he also was a part of the study staffing on Rising Above the Gathering Storm. Peter is now here serving as Senior Associate to the President. We're delighted he's here. Peter, please come on. Give him a hand, please.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to see so many current and former colleagues and so many friends. And for those of you who are from out of the area, have come from somewhere on the East Coast perhaps, or from further afield, welcome to UMBC. Just want to go over a few housekeeping details with all of you, just to make sure you're all oriented. First and most importantly are the restrooms. If you haven't found them already, they're actually right behind us in the lobby. A second housekeeping detail is if you arrived with luggage and you haven't found a place to park it, there's actually a space over through these doors right here where you can put your luggage to get that out of the way for the day. So as we go along through the day, there will actually be a couple of standing mics as well. I see one of them over there. And I think there's going to be a second one. I don't really see it with that bright light in my eye. There we go. So when we get to Q&A and that sort of thing, you'll be able to use those microphones. So welcome again to this day together. There will be some breakout groups and working sessions as the day goes along. So we'll have some plenary speakers to get our thinking going on various topics. But one of the key elements for the whole day is really the working sessions and having conversations with your colleagues and thinking about the kinds of activities that we are already undertaking on our campuses and could be undertaking on our campuses to improve undergraduate STEM access and teaching and learning and completion. So first of all, I'd like to invite up to the podium Roberto Rodriguez. Roberto serves in the White House Domestic Policy Council as Special Assistant to the President for Education. So Roberto will be giving us some framing comments for today's discussions. Roberto was previously Chief Education Counsel to the United States, to U.S. Senator Edward Kennedy as Chairman of the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. In this capacity, he managed Democratic education agenda for the committee and led policy development strategy for legislation addressing early childhood education, elementary and secondary education, higher education, and adult education. Roberto began his tenure on Capitol Hill working for the Senate Health Committee on the development of No Child Left Behind and has worked on various reauthorizations of federal legislation. Prior to working on Capitol Hill, he worked as the Senior Education Specialist at the National Council of La Raza. He's a graduate of the University of Michigan and Harvard Graduate School of Education. Welcome to the podium.
Thank you very much, Peter. Good morning, everyone. It is a thrill to be here and to see all of you this morning. And I want to begin by thanking each of you for being here today, those of you who traveled from near and far. I'm so pleased to be here today. I want to begin also by thanking Freeman for his outstanding leadership and partnership with us to host the first college opportunity STEM workshop here at UMBC. And a very robust welcome to all of you. I'm pleased to be here and pleased also to be joined by our other outstanding leader on STEM education at the White House, the Assistant to the President for Science and Technology, and our Director of the Office of Science and Technology Policy, Dr. John Holdren, who you'll hear from in just a moment. But I wanted to begin by just having setting the stage, if you will, for today's work, for the arc of today's conversations and discussions. We're thrilled to have a really esteemed group of folks that have been assembled here today to lead us in a discussion on how to strengthen the pipeline to and through college in science, math, technology, and engineering. And this is part of a charge, a call to action that President Obama and the First Lady issued last year as part of a first ever College Opportunity Summit. It was a call to do more to really build the pathway to and through college, for college access and success for more of our young people across the country. When we had this first College Opportunity Summit that was hosted at the White House, there were over 140 colleges, college presidents, nonprofits, philanthropic leaders, other partners who joined in that charge, and focused particularly on what we can do to support low-income, underrepresented and first-generation college goers, reach those doors of higher education and successfully complete. And this goal of improving and increasing college access, affordability, and attainment is a central part of the President's education vision. Early in his administration, he set a goal that's been the North Star for us to lead the world with the highest proportion of college graduates by 2020, by the end of the decade. That means about 8 million more college graduates that we need to get to and through higher education. It's a vital goal for our country in terms of our education standing in the world, but it's also a really important part of the President's broader vision for a strong economy, for a strong middle class, a vision to grow ladders of opportunity and ladders of social mobility. And we know that a higher education degree is still one of the most important drivers for upward mobility in our country and in our communities. So the President and the First Lady are committed to continuing to do more to partner with our colleges and universities, with our business leaders, with our nonprofits, with others, to help reach this national goal. And they will embark upon a second convening and call to action around college opportunity in early December of this year. So today's convening and today's discussions are part of that broader effort, one of 4 discussions that we'll have specifically on strengthening the STEM pipeline. Let me also speak about the broader efforts that are underway around college opportunity and college access and how this fits into that frame. The First Lady's Reach Higher initiative has focused on doing more to support some of the gaps that we're beginning to see earlier in a student's career before they reach college, even in high school, beginning with the shortage of counselors that our young people have access to. You know, nationally, the ratio of school counselors to students is about 1 to 470. In states like California, over 1,000 students for every 1 counselor. So she's focused on trying to do more to make sure that we have an all-hands-on-deck approach with our counselors and with other mentors to support our young people beginning in high school. We focused on beginning a new conversation around early college readiness and building teams of superintendents, college presidents, community college leaders, and business and foundation leaders at the local level to begin to build a stronger pathway to college for our high school students. We were proud in August to bring together 11 communities, Baltimore County being one of those communities, led by Dr. Hrabowski and other partners here in the area, to begin planning around a roadmap to boost FAFSA completion, to boost college readiness, early college course attainment, to boost graduation rates ultimately, and to do more to make sure that our communities across the country are helping prepare our young people to enter a four-year institution without the need for remediation as a main goal, and to persist through that institution, particularly from that freshman to sophomore year that we know is such an important gatekeeper for college completion. So we have a set of communities moving forward on that effort. We're doing more to draw attention to and begin a new national conversation around improving and supporting developmental education. We know that fewer than 1 out of every 4 students at some of our community colleges that actually take developmental education successfully persist into credit-bearing coursework and ultimately into a degree. We have to do better to address that point within our educational pipeline if we are going to do a better job of making sure that we're boosting college attainment. So in response to many of these challenges, particularly in the STEM area, the good news is that we have a national coalition of partners that's poised to take new action and to help. Just at the College Opportunity Summit that was hosted at the White House, in that past summit, we had new commitments to create STEM summer programs, to offer high school students access to research and professional fields and exposure to careers in STEM fields. We had new commitments to partner with high schools to create new programs on STEM education, to enable college-level coursework beginning in high school, dual enrollment in STEM while still in high school. And we had new commitments to offer real-world learning experiences in STEM, where students learn alongside STEM professionals in businesses and in other sectors to understand post-secondary requirements and their career options. You know, the president, when he speaks about improving STEM education, when he talked about this early in his administration back in 2009, he said, quote, "This is going to make more of a difference in determining how well we do as a country than just about anything else we do." And over these past 5 years, we have endeavored as an administration to strengthen STEM education along the entire pipeline. We know that we have to do better. We're at about the middle of the pack in terms of science and math attainment. We have fewer than 3% of our African American, our Latino, our Native American students who end up persisting through and earning a college degree in engineering or in science. And our PCAST, the President's Council on Science and Technology Advisors, has estimated that we will have 1 million fewer STEM graduates than we need for these high growth fields in our economy. So we know we must do better. The President is focused on trying to do more, beginning with making sure that we are providing every student access to a great STEM teacher early in elementary school and all the way through middle and high school. We've launched a race to the top. We're investing billions of dollars in helping our states deliver better professional development to their teachers, improve and develop new classroom resources on STEM education, do more to help support students' pathway to a college and career-ready graduation. And we've launched a new Investing in Innovation Fund where we are looking to test, validate, discover, and scale the next set of solutions pedagogically around teaching and learning that will help close the achievement gap in STEM. All of these developments are coupled in a broader agenda for us that is focused on equity and opportunity across our education system, making sure that every young person can realize their full potential and have the chance to attain and achieve at a high level, regardless of their zip code, regardless of their gender, regardless of their race. It is fitting that we are beginning this conversation around strengthening STEM education and hosting this workshop here at UMBC, because UMBC is nationally recognized as a leader, the leading producer of minority students and minority graduates in the areas of science and math, IT, and engineering. And there's something special happening on this campus. I know I've been here, I've spent time in the classrooms here with Freeman and with your faculty, and it is the connection that you make with your students. It's the support academically that you provide them to be able to get ahead, the exposure to diversity, the team building, the engagement in problem solving, the mentorship and the support every step along the way, and most importantly, the culture of high expectations and of support that surrounds young people here on campus, and make sure that they understand that that there is no other option than for them to move ahead, to earn that degree, and to be a leader in their community. So we want to do more to bring that spirit, bring these efforts around the country. That's what this workshop is about today, and we want to carry that message across the country, and we're looking forward to doing that in the coming weeks. So with that now, I'd like to go ahead and introduce the leader here of UMBC, Freeman Hrabowski, president of UMBC. Freeman has served as president here since 1992. I think Freeman needs no introduction. I will say it's been a personal pleasure to get to know Freeman over the course of our administration. He is graciously serving as the chair of the President's Council and Initiative on Educational Excellence for African American students within our administration. He's been a trusted and wonderful advisor on matters of education, as well as in improving higher education. And more than anything, he has a real passion for making sure that we're strengthening the pipeline, particularly for our first generation students. And he walks the walk in that effort. And so he's a wonderful colleague and friend, and I'm honored to be here with him and to welcome him to the podium.
Good morning again. Let me begin by bringing to your attention, if you've not seen it, the most recent issue of Peer Review. The issue focuses on gender equity in STEM, and I think it's so powerful that I wanted to bring it up and suggest that you look at it. The issue has been co-edited by Kelly Mack from the American Association of Colleges and Universities, and one of my colleagues here, Pat McDermott, who's vice provost and who led our NSF advanced effort with some others. The issue focuses on a number of the challenges that women face, and I don't think any is greater than the article that is called The Jessica Effect. And written, co-led, the lead author was Renetta Tull, another one of our senior administrators here, and an engineer. The Jessica Effect focuses on the story of Jessica Stoto Perez, who was a promising PhD student in chemical engineering, grad student at UMBC, who was tragically killed by her husband in 2004. And the article talks about how that tragedy pushed us as a university to ask some very hard questions about the impact of graduate work in STEM on students in those programs involving family members, and the need to include family members in what we're doing, especially for the Latino population, we found, as we think about ways of celebrating the success of students and helping families understand what students go through when they're in these programs. And so I recommend it to you very highly. We're delighted that you're here. This is a campus that has students from over 100 countries. And we talk specifically about both international and domestic diversity. And we talk about the need for specificity in thinking about how you help young men, young women in particular disciplines. And as you think about, as we as a campus think about what's been most important. And to us, it has been to focus on institutional culture change. If you've not looked at the study that I had a part to play in chairing a committee on underrepresentation, didn't surprise us. Peter was the head of that study group. Didn't surprise us that very few underrepresented students who begin with a major in science and engineering graduate with a bachelor's. Only about 20% of blacks and Hispanics. I think it was somewhat surprising, though, that under a third of the white students who began with majors in those areas graduate in those areas, and only about 41% of Asian Americans. And the fact is that as quickly as we want to say it's a K through 12 problem, I think what was courageous about our group is that people from a range of institutions, from Harvard to Howard to community colleges, agreed that a part of the problem was that we needed to look in the mirror ourselves in higher education. We talked about the need to prepare better teachers, of course, but we looked at this question of culture because it wasn't just that students were not well prepared. You might know or you may not know large numbers, large percentages of students who are well prepared in STEM, who have the fives on AP exams in STEM areas, don't make it either. And that often you find the more prestigious the institution, the more students leave science to go to something else, often because they did not do as well. And so what we said in that study is that we needed to focus on a variety of strategies designed to have institutions look at their culture, look at the involvement of faculty in these issues, and quite frankly, to ask one fundamental question: just how important is undergraduate STEM education on the campus in all that we do? What is one of the things about Maryland, and with Britt Curran, my colleague who will be here sometime today, and the University System of Maryland, is that we really have, as a system, looked at this notion of course redesign and have focused on what it means to think about changing the way we teach, particularly the first year or two of that work. And I would say several very important themes: the idea of greater student ownership of learning, collaboration and group work in problem solving, and developing a sense of community among students of all races have been very important to this campus and others. Roberta, I love your saying we are the leader. We are one of the leaders in the country. There are a number of places doing some good work. But I will say this: what we learned that helped us in supporting minority students, especially a large group of African Americans, has been helpful in looking at what we do with students in general. And it's the connecting with students, getting them involved in the research, and understanding the need to connect with other universities, with national agencies, and a number of you are here today, with companies, and connecting the students in such a way they get involved in that work. Most important for us, 40% of our bachelor's degrees are in science and engineering, with large percentages who go on to graduate school or professional schools across the country. I'm now delighted to introduce John Holdren, who is Assistant to the President for Science and Technology, Director of the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, and co-chair of the President's Council on Science and Technology. What has been encouraging to me, let me say, about John, is that he sincerely, like Roberto and others, they sincerely care about these issues. When we can get people who are focused on the research to also focus on undergrad and grad education, but particularly right now, undergrad education, you begin to see whether a country or a university or a culture really would think this is important to the future of our nation. Before joining the Obama administration, Dr. Holden was the Teresa and John Hines Professor of Environmental Policy and Director of the Program on Science, Technology, and Public Policy at Harvard's Kennedy School. He had also served as a professor in Harvard's Department of Earth and Planetary Sciences and director of the independent nonprofit Woods Hole Research Center. Previously to that, he had worked at Berkeley for a long time, from the early 70s, and actually had co-founded their interdisciplinary graduate program in energy and resources. And in the Clinton administration, he served as a member of PCAST through both terms. He holds grad degrees in engineering and theoretical plasma physics from MIT and Stanford. He's a member of the National Academies of Sciences, the Academy of Sciences and of Engineering, and the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. And he's also a foreign member of the Royal Society of London and the former president of AAAS. He's a MacArthur and he accepted the lecture, gave the acceptance lecture for the Nobel Peace Prize on behalf of the Pugwash Conference in 1995. We're delighted to have John here and looking forward to what he has to say. Thank you all very much. Welcome to UMBC.
Well, thank you very much, Freeman, for that kind introduction, and thank you for hosting us here at UMBC. I also want to thank you, Freeman, for your personal commitment to this set of issues over the years, and for sharing your enthusiasm and your ideas with so many of us on so many occasions. You've really been a great guiding force in this domain. I'm really very pleased to be part of starting off our series of college opportunity STEM education workshops at this particular institution, which is known really across the country, has been known across the country for decades for its commitment to and its success at graduating accomplished, bright, and diverse STEM graduates. I do also want to acknowledge my colleague and friend Roberto Rodriguez from the Domestic Policy Council, a very close partner along with his colleagues there with OSTP in working to improve STEM education. And I want to acknowledge my friend and colleague, the amazing Professor S. James Gates from the University of Maryland, who is the only person I know who has ever been able to explain string theory in 30 seconds, and who also, as a member of PCAST, this President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology, has been the driver and the principal contributor to 3 PCAST studies on STEM education, one on K through 12, Prepare and Inspire, one on the first 2 years of college STEM education, most recently a letter report on MOOCs and their possible impact on higher education, and there's still another one. In addition to all these fully baked studies for the President, there's another one in the oven that will be released shortly. And again, the driving force was Jim Gates, and you'll hear from him later in the program. I do consider it a particular privilege to address this audience of high-powered educators who have exhibited passion for and dedication to this issue, which is of so much importance to the nation that is raising our game in STEM education and ensuring that our young people have the skills, the tools, and the knowledge that they will need to build and participate in a bright tomorrow. As everybody in this room knows, I think this is not just a matter of educating the next generation of discoverers and inventors, the next generation of Nobel laureates, winners of National Medals of Science, National Medals of Technology and Innovation, the next Steve Jobs, the next Bill Gates, the high-tech entrepreneurs. It's not just a matter of doing that. It's also a matter of getting the technically skilled workforce that the jobs of the 21st century require, and perhaps equally important, it's a matter of developing the science-savvy citizenry that a democracy will require to function effectively in an era when more and more of the policy issues in front of our elected decision makers have substantial science and engineering content. For those reasons, President Obama has said that perhaps the single most important thing we can do for the future of our country is to lift our game in STEM education. I agree with him, and that's why I'm still there after 6 years. I know that on this particular point, I'm pretty much preaching to the choir in this particular room, but I do want to underscore the importance and the benefit of having had a president who really gets it when it comes to the importance of STEM education. Early in his administration, President Obama called for an all-hands-on-deck approach to improve STEM learning outcomes, and to date, in fact, partners in industry, philanthropy, nonprofits, universities, community colleges, schools, school districts have all stepped up in impressive and impactful ways to answer this call for all hands on deck. Already in 2009, the first year of his administration, President Obama launched the Educate to Innovate campaign, which included federal investments and public-private partnerships with the dual goals of helping inspire young people at the K through 12 levels to pursue STEM in the first place, and secondly, to provide those young people with support, with tools, with the role models that they need to succeed in STEM studies and careers. Scores of companies, philanthropies, colleges, and others have stepped up with hundreds of millions of dollars in monetary and in-kind commitments to advance this important program. And in fact, the sustained commitment from private sector partners demonstrates that STEM learning is not just important to educators, philanthropists, and government leaders, it's also important to companies across America, large and small, which realize that they need STEM talent to grow their businesses and protect their bottom lines. There's a tremendous amount of positive progress being made through these initiatives, and we have had many individual examples of success. I'll mention a few of them later, but it's important to understand that we can and must do more. Here's why. It's a fact that American students are still only in the middle of the pack in international measures of both math and science competency. It's a fact that we're losing to other majors 60% of college freshmen who enter college planning to pursue a STEM degree. It's a fact that today women occupy only 28% of STEM jobs, and that the percentage of women earning computer science and engineering degrees has decreased over the past decade. It's a fact that students from underserved communities often lack the tools and resources early on to get inspired and prepared to study STEM in high school or beyond. And it's a fact that a growing percentage of jobs around the world will require STEM skills going forward in order to succeed in a 21st century job market. American students have to aim higher and reach higher in math, science, and engineering. But it's also a fact that young people by nature are curious and creative about how to solve problems in the world around them. And those, of course, are the goals of science and engineering. So it's up to us to find better ways to nurture that spirit of curiosity, rather than dampening it, as we so often end up doing. We must offer more support to students to gain the foundational skills they need to turn that curiosity into creativity and to succeed in STEM careers. As I've already noted, the Obama administration has undertaken a number of efforts to address that challenge, but I want now to elaborate a bit on that approach. One important element has been setting ambitious national goals and identifying ways to make progress to meet them. Those goals include moving American kids from the middle to the top of the pack in international rankings in science and math, preparing 100,000 new excellent STEM teachers, producing 1 million more STEM graduates over the next decade, and broadening participation in STEM fields for women and underrepresented minorities. A second element has been maintaining strong investments in STEM education at the federal level, even during difficult budgetary times. For example, the President's FY 2015 budget proposes $2.9 billion for STEM education, an increase of 3.7% over the 2014 investment. The third element has been incorporating STEM education as a priority into the administration's overall education reform strategy. For example, the Department of Education's $4 billion Race to the Top program and Youth Career Connect grants, as well as the high school redesign pilot at the Department of Labor, each have included a preference for proposals which emphasized innovation in STEM education and, in particular, support for reaching girls and other groups historically underrepresented in the STEM fields. The fourth element has been the deployment of the President's personal passion for getting more students excited about science and math. No president has used his bully pulpit to talk about STEM education as much as President Obama has. No president has held as many White House events to celebrate and inspire kids who are excelling in math and science and to celebrate their teachers and mentors. Astronomy night for kids on the South Lawn. Bringing middle school students into the Roosevelt Room to join the president in conversation with astronauts on the International Space Station by video link. Bringing outstanding teachers and mentors into the White House to celebrate their achievements with presidential awards. The first ever White House science fairs, 4 of them now, which invites student winners of math, science, and robotics competitions across the country to enjoy a spotlight in the White House. This spring, in addition, the President hosted the first ever White House Maker Fair to showcase students and adults who are making use of new tools and skills to design and make really extraordinary inventions and solutions to everyday challenges. The fifth element, of course, is partnerships. We want to sustain the overwhelmingly positive response that I've already mentioned to the President's call for all hands on deck to raise our game in STEM education. And that, of course, is a place where all of you in this room come in. The call has already been answered, as I mentioned, by a large number of remarkably enthusiastic partners. The over 100 CEOs who came together as part of the Change the Equation initiative to invest in improving K-12 STEM teaching. The National Math and Science Initiative's work to improve STEM college readiness through a proven AP program. The partners who've come together under 100K in 10 to reach the President's goal to train and retain 100,000 new excellent STEM teachers over a decade. The mentoring campaign called US 2020, which is working with a number of companies and city leaders to connect more working STEM professionals with mentoring opportunities. But of course, the main focus today here is undergraduate STEM education, and there the President and First Lady's call to action to improve college access, enrollment, and completion for more students from low-income families and underserved communities is a centerpiece of the administration's effort. The administration has again, in this domain, been impressed by the overwhelming response from the wider community, particularly presidents of universities, colleges, and community colleges, CEOs of companies, heads of nonprofits and foundations. A key focus of the White House College Opportunity event this last January was, in particular, the importance of helping more low-income and disadvantaged youth succeed in critical science, technology, engineering, and math fields. As the President's Science and Technology Advisor, I took part in that event, and I was struck by the extraordinary commitment and passion shown in the area of improving STEM college degree enrollment and completion for more of the students who are currently underrepresented in STEM fields. A wide range of foundations, nonprofits, college and university presidents responded specifically to the President's call by announcing new steps to boost STEM achievement and broaden participation in the STEM fields. And I want particularly to thank the folks in this room for their leadership and that of their institutions in stepping up to this challenge and committing to make real change for students around the country. Today, of course, is an opportunity for all of us to learn about the best of existing models and programs, as well as to develop new ideas and tools for what we can all do to improve outcomes, particularly for underrepresented students in STEM. Many of the programs that you will be talking about today align with what the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology, PCAST, put forth in its report, which I already mentioned, on the first 2 years of STEM undergraduate education, Engage to Excel. PCAST estimated in that report, a number that you've heard repeated many times since, that the U.S. economy would need 1 million more STEM college graduates at both 2-year and 4-year institutions in the next decade to meet the growing demand for workers with these skills. We also reported in that PCAST report that fewer than 40% of college freshmen who enter school planning to complete a STEM degree complete one. I already mentioned that, as did Freeman Hrabowski. If the United States could raise that STEM completion rate from 40% to 50%, 10 points, we could solve most of the 1 million STEM graduate shortage. It's not going to be easy, but PCAST in that report identified some steps that universities could take that would have a large impact. And again, Freeman mentioned a number of them, but I'll mention them again. First of all, educators need to redesign entry-level lecture courses, which are so dull and so rote as a general matter that they discourage many talented students from pursuing STEM fields. I taught at the university level for 38 years. I know a lot about offering dull and rote lectures, let me tell you. Instead, when faculty use research-based teaching strategies like active learning that allow students to solve problems in small groups, students achieve far greater levels of mastery and achievement. And they stick with STEM degrees at higher rates. The second thing is that universities need to give students more opportunities to conduct research earlier in their academic careers. Some universities are replacing traditional cookbook laboratory classes with discovery-based research courses that provide students hand-on engagement with authentic research experiences. I've visited a number of colleges and universities around the country, including HBCUs, that are doing this with enormous success. It's incredible to see what freshmen and sophomores in real laboratory experiences are achieving and learning, and how inspired they're getting at doing it. I wrap up by emphasizing that there is a lot more to do and that the White House remains committed to doing its part. To start, we will be holding additional workshops like this one at 3 other college campuses around the country over the next 3 weeks. We know these engagements are building on a strong foundation laid by other organizations, including the AAU, the APLU, the Howard Hughes Medical Institute, the Simon Foundation, the Posse Foundation, the Helmsley Trust, the National Academies, the AAAS, and many, many others. As you may know, President Obama has renewed his call to action on college opportunity with the announcement that the President and First Lady will host the next Summit on College Opportunity on December 4th and 2014 this year. As for today's meeting, I also have to regret that I will need to leave at about 10 o'clock to get back to the White House. There is a lot going on there. Not all of it as uplifting as what's going on here. I would rather stay, I can assure you. But a member of OSTP's STEM education team, Dr. Danielle Carnival, who is down here, will be staying for the rest of the meeting. We'll take abundant notes, and I will have the opportunity to hear from her what terrific ideas are forthcoming from this group. I really look forward to hearing those ideas. I look forward to the new round of commitments that will be materializing at the next College Opportunity Summit and the White House. And I thank you again for everything that you folks in this room have been doing and for what you will continue to do. Thank you very much. So I understand that there's time for some questions. I certainly have another 15 minutes that I can stay. So I don't know if we have, do we have microphones, or are people going to? Okay, so there are microphones on both sides, so if you want to ask a question, please step up to the microphone. I sometimes ask for questions, comments, or cries of outrage, but we would prefer questions which consist of...
You get a chance to go around the country. Is it your sense that more and more institutions are looking at culture, the culture of the institution, attitudes of people, involvement of faculty, of research faculty, of full professors in the work of undergrad education?
Absolutely it is. I've visited quite a number of universities in the course of the Obama administration, quite a few others before that. I think there's a real sea change underway in this respect. But I wouldn't even have had to travel to see it, because at that White House summit in January, there was an incredible array of people with amazing stories to tell about what was happening on their campuses. And again, those range from community college leaders to research university leaders and everything in between from all around the country. And we're really moving in this domain.
And so in the spirit of science, is there a systematic approach we're planning to use to see if the change in culture and attitudes will result in higher percentages of students at 2- and 4-year institutions by race and gender? Have we thought through how to have some kind of systematic
that is a great question. You know, the National Science Board's publication, National Science and Engineering Indicators, that comes out every 2 years, tracks a great many of the relevant statistics. The problem is that the work of compiling that from all the diverse sources of information is so great that it only comes out every 2 years. And typically when it does come out, if you look at the 2014 edition, which exists, most of the data stop in 2011. And so there's a time lag. And I think it would behoove us to get better at some closer to real time measures of how we are doing. I think if we do that, we will see some impressive progress, and we'll also see some domains where we need to work harder.
Very good.
Good morning. Thank you.
Let's go over here. We'll alternate between the two mics. And please introduce yourselves when you start.
Thank you for your remarks. My name is Wendy Raymond. I'm at Davidson College in North Carolina and the chair of the Committee on Equal Opportunities in Science and Engineering at the National Science Foundation, which reports biennially to Congress as mandated by law. And I want to say that I'm happy to know that you think the prospective look is so good, but we've been doing this for 3 and 4 decades with really well-intended funding sources to make these kinds of changes, and we, in this room and elsewhere, with exceptions like UMBC and our HBCUs, have not moved the needle yet in these areas. So what we're saying at CEOS, where we've asked the National Science Foundation to take a bold initiative to do some of the things you've asked, longitudinal data, not just supporting innovative approaches, but trying to replicate what we know works, is really important. So we have examples like UMBC where this is not rocket science. As you well said, we know what we need to do. But how do we move to institutional transformation is really the thing. What are the levers the federal government will use to change institutions? Because unlike rocket science, we have not landed anywhere new, this effort at diversity and inclusion. So although it's not hard, we know what to do. What's keeping us from moving the needle? And I think that's institutional transformation, as Freeman so well pointed out.
You know, since you mentioned rocket science, I have to say that I was a rocket scientist, and this is harder.
Exactly.
This is harder.
We've proven that. Thank you.
And at the same time, there is no lack of ideas. Obviously, you and your committee have got some. We have, you know, a committee on STEM education in the National Science and Technology Council, one of the 5 standing committees under which there are a number of subcommittees. NSF has been a co-leader of that committee. I think it would be great if you make sure that NSF's representative, Joan Farini-Mundy, is completely up to date on the insights your committee has produced about how to get this done, because she will bring them into COSTEM, and we will noodle on them and figure out if there is more that we can be doing in some of these specific domains. Yes.
Dr. Holdren, thank you very much for your remarks. I'm Jay Perman, president of the University of Maryland, Baltimore. Thank you as well to the entire Obama administration for this commitment. And Freeman, thank you for organizing and hosting this event. I understand the focus that we must have on our undergraduate students, getting them committed to STEM fields, getting them finished. I understand the focus that we must have on high schoolers in getting them to, as was said. But there have been only passing references, it seems to me, to what we need to do earlier than that. I have to confess, I'm a pediatrician. I think a lot about little kids. And I worry sometimes that in our zeal and our understanding of the need to get those million more, we get impatient. Obviously, if we focus on little kids, if we focus on elementary school, we're not going to do it in a decade. Are we doing enough in that area?
Well, let me say a couple things about that. Of course, it is a good point. I think the relative focus in this meeting on college education is because that is the decreed topic of these particular workshops. But the first PCAST report on STEM education was on K through 12, and the principal architect of that report is 2 people behind you in the line, Jim Gates. He may want to say something about that. But we have had a major emphasis on the 2 thrusts of that report's recommendations, prepare and inspire. We've had a lot of effort, and Change the Equation falls into this category, of improving the classroom experience at the K through 12 level, including providing people from national labs, universities, corporations to come into classrooms and not just work with the teachers on developing a more hands-on, more real-world relevant curriculum, but serving as role models for these kids to understand what exciting and rewarding careers are available in these fields. And of course, we don't have to turn everybody into a STEM major. I want to emphasize that that's not the point. The humanities are important, the arts are important. we need to lift our game all across education, and we're trying to do that. But we have had a particular challenge in STEM, and that's why, as we are moving into the 21st century, we have the emphasis on trying to make our education system in STEM match the STEM challenges and opportunities that the world presents. But we really are focused, in addition to the focus of this meeting on college STEM education, we really are focused on K through 12. You got to get them young. You're absolutely right.
Thank you very much.
This side.
Good morning. My name is Roger Ramsamy, Provost Nova Manassas campus at Northern Virginia Community College. Our college has approximately 80,000 students in there and a very humongous population. 53% of it is minority serving. One of the issues that come up in Northern Virginia is the fact that currently there are over 44,000 jobs available in the STEM fields. Average by 2021, they're expecting somewhere in the range of about 1 million jobs for replacement and new ones. We recognize a major problem, and as mentioned a while ago, that we have instituted programs within the elementary, middle, and high school in order to meet some of the demands of those jobs, where we have built programs within the elementary school, STEM programs in the elementary, middle, and high school, allowing students to matriculate through that process and come directly into us with articulation into the universities. But you mentioned eliminating remediation, and that has been one of the biggest challenges for us, simply because in order to do that, we had to now invest in the K-12 system in order to get those teachers qualified to teach at that level. It has been a major investment for us, a big challenge. We have been doing it on minor amounts of funds. What do you think should be done, or could there be more investment nationwide in order for us to get to that demand that is needed for STEM?
Well, this is another challenge that was identified in the first PCAST report on Prepare and Inspire, the fact that so many of the STEM, the folks teaching in STEM fields at the K through 12 level really don't have the qualifications needed to do that well. One of the initiatives that we have launched in the Obama administration to try to deal with this is an initiative to get universities to offer programs that make it very attractive to majors in STEM fields to also get a teaching credential, so that more folks who actually graduate from college with STEM degrees will end up in STEM teaching programs. Of course, another thing we have to do is raise both the level of compensation and the level of admiration that our teachers at the K through 12 level get. They do not get the prestige and the recognition that the importance of their work requires. And that and better salaries and better training together, I think, are all required before we will really be on top of the challenge you mentioned.
Thank you.
Jim Gates, glad you got to the microphone.
Thank you, John. Good to see you again. My question is a sort of a prospective question. I have been utterly surprised at the dedication that both you and the President have demonstrated to this issue of STEM education. And this is, in my lifetime, the most exciting period I have ever seen, with the potential of transformation in a fundamental and sustainable way. But you'll notice I mentioned the word sustainable. And so my question is, would you be willing to share with this group your thoughts and possibly any insights you have into the President's thoughts about how the momentum that we have built up over this last 5 years can be sustained into the future?
That is a great question. I have to admit I get asked variants of it in every speech I give on every topic. I was just giving a speech on climate change the other day, and they're saying, what will you do if the Republicans win? I think, first of all, that our education system and the importance of STEM education is something that's recognized on both sides of the aisle. I don't really see anybody disputing that lifting our game in education in general and STEM education in particular is important to the future of the country, to our economy, to our security, to our environment, to public health, to everything else that matters. And so I am hopeful that demonstrations of success at the kinds of initiatives that this administration has put forward will sufficiently impress folks in both parties that whoever the next president turns out to be will continue to advance the ball. I'm an optimist. If I weren't an optimist, I'd be out fishing instead of giving these remarks. I very much hope and expect that that will be the case. I think, referring again to my speech of the other day on climate change when I was asked this question, I think the prospects for retaining the momentum in our education and in particular STEM education initiatives are probably better than our prospects of continuing the momentum on climate change, although I hope that both will somehow happen. We're getting down to the wire here. There are just two more folks up, so I'll try to take both, but we'll need to be brief.
Andrew Coy, Digital Harbor Foundation. I turned an old rec center in inner city Baltimore into a tech center and teach things like 3D printing and web and app development to inner city kids. I was a former classroom teacher myself. But my question is really, I have an interest obviously in technology specifically. My question is around ways that informal learning can play an important role. I mean, the internet was built by people who never went to school to build the internet. And thinking about how do those complement each other and deepen and extend the experience that students are exposed to during the day. I'm just curious what you're seeing across the country and how can we more formally support informal learning?
Well, there is, I think, a lot of informal learning going on. Some of it's going on, interestingly enough, through games that are educational. And we've actually had a person in OSTP for the last several years, two people now have held this role, who are experts in game development and educational games, which is an extremely promising way for kids to learn things outside of school. Another form of informal learning which is extremely important is our museums in general and our science museums in particular, which have become, I think, far more creative and innovative over the last decade or so than they had been before. And I've visited science museums around the country, and I see kids doing amazing things with enormous enthusiasm in these. I think the whole science fair, which now includes technology fairs, engineering fairs, robotics fairs, mathematics competitions, city planning fairs, has been blossoming. And there's a tremendous amount of informal learning that takes place in those environments. So I think a lot is happening. I think we can be creative and think of additional ways to boost that space, which is certainly important. And maybe as this meeting goes on, there'll be some further ideas about that. But thank you for bringing up that point.
Good morning. My name is Vasudevan from the University of New Hampshire. We talk about increasing the number of STEM graduates in very broad terms, but if you look at workforce demand in New Hampshire, and I suspect this is the case in many states, there's demand in advanced manufacturing, computer science, cybersecurity, and so on, but not certainly in all areas of STEM. The other thing is there's an article in today's NPR about too few university jobs for America's young scientists. It talks about 40,000 postdoctoral students who have no hopes of getting a job anywhere. And I was wondering if you could comment about this.
Well, this is a big question, but let me just take the too few university jobs issue. One of the thrusts that we've got is to make plain that university jobs are not the only productive place for PhD graduates in STEM fields to go. There is a large number of opportunities in the private sector, a large number of opportunities in the philanthropic sector, a large number of opportunities in the civil society sector that can put these talents to use. We are pursuing a very interesting program in the National Science Foundation, which involves providing entrepreneurial skills to graduate students and postdocs in science fields so that more of them will become high-tech entrepreneurs and take advantage of the many opportunities that are available in that space. So it certainly is a real issue, matching the characteristics of your graduates to the needs of the society. We can do a better job of that, and we are certainly starting to work on it. I, alas, have to get back to the White House at this point. Roberto had to do so already because he had a meeting with the president on early education scheduled at 11 o'clock. A further testimony to the importance of this issue. If you think about what the president is currently having to worry about, he's worried about the Middle East, he's worried about Ukraine, he's worried about Ebola, he's worried about Syria, and he's having meetings on early education. Let that be an inspiration to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Let's have another round of applause for Roberto and Freeman and John for setting up the day for us. I'd like to welcome up to the stage now our first panel, which will take a little bit of a deeper dive into one of the critical issues that's already been alluded to today, which is innovation in STEM teaching and learning. You've already heard that we need to get rid of dull, rote introductory courses, and this panel will help us start some discussion around that. The panel will be chaired by Susan Singer, who's Division Director in the Division of Undergraduate Education at the National Science Foundation, and also Lawrence McKinley Gould Professor in Biology and Cognitive Science Departments at Carleton College. She pursues a career that integrates science and education. She has a PhD in biology from Rensselaer, but she also completed a teacher certification program in New York State. She's a former AAAS fellow and NSF program officer in biology. She's participated in 6 National Academies studies and chaired 3 that authored America's Lab Report, Promising Practices in STEM Undergraduate Education, and most recently, Discipline-Based Education Research, Understanding and Improving Learning in Undergraduate Science and Engineering. Susan.
It's wonderful to be with all of you this morning and our distinguished panel. The purpose of this panel is to give you a flavor of some of the wonderful STEM innovations that are going on across the country. It's intended to inspire, but it's also intended to be very, very helpful. And as a result, our panelists have all agreed that they actually only want to devote 6 minutes each to giving you an overview of the work they're doing so that there will be time in the hour for all of you to engage in conversation with them. So as a result, I want to briefly introduce them, but I don't want to spend all their time on their bios. So I'm going to do my best to celebrate their many contributions and then move forward in a question-driven approach to the panel. So you've already heard some of the wonderful things Jim Gates has accomplished and contributed. In addition to all the work that he's done with PCAST, I just wanted to note that he's also on the State of Maryland Board of Education, and then to draw some attention to, in addition to all the incredible things he's doing with education, I'm awed how he continues to be an amazing theoretical physicist. And in particular, in 2013, Jim became the very first African-American physicist in 150 years to be elected to the National Academy of Sciences. He has been awarded the Mendel Medal in recognition of his influential work on supersymmetry, supergravity, and string theory, as well as his advocacy for science and science education in the United States abroad. He's been named to the National Commission on Forensic Science, the Department of Justice, and the National Institute of Standards and Technology. In 2014, he was named Scientist of the Year by Harvard Foundation. He's gone and done so many things that when I think of what integrating education and research means, I think of Jim. We also have with us Susan Ambrose, who is currently Professor of Education and History and Senior Vice Provost for Undergraduate Education and Experiential Learning at Northeastern University. And prior to that, she had a very long career at Carnegie Mellon University, where she was both an Associate Provost for Education and the Director of the Eberly Center for Teaching Excellence. And Susan, you may recognize, has done a wonderful job with integrating what we know from cognitive science and research and learning into actual classroom practice. Her volume on how learning works has been translated into numerous languages and is used in so many ways throughout the country. We also have joining us Bill LaCourse, who is Professor of Chemistry and Dean of the College of Natural and Mathematical Sciences here at UMBC, and I look forward to learning more about the secret sauce that has made UMBC so effective with their students. And following Bill's remarks, Joel Schildbach is going to join us from Johns Hopkins, and Joel is serving as Vice Dean of Johns Hopkins University Krieger School of Arts and Sciences, and he's a professor in the Department of Biology, and there have been some really terrific innovations going on at Johns Hopkins that we are going to learn about. In addition, you may want to talk to Joel during the day about his work with the biology education transformation efforts across the country. He's one of a small number of university leaders that were selected to work together over the course of the year to see if at the department level nationally they could change what's happening in undergraduate biology education. And then Uri Treisman, who again is one of those individuals that really needs no introduction but deserves many accolades, is a professor of mathematics and public affairs at the University of Texas at Austin, where he directs the Charles A. Dana Center. Uri has done so much, not just with improving mathematics education, teacher education, but really pushing hard and having success with system-wide transformation, and he's going to wrap up our panel with some of that work. He's actively involved in organizations that work to improve American K-12 education. He serves on the boards of the New Teacher Project and Education Resource Strategies. He's a senior advisor for the Aspen Institute Urban Superintendents Network and the Dana Center Aspen Network of Chief Academic Officers and District Mathematics Leaders. He is a 2014 Distinguished Fellow at the Education Commission of the States. Seasonal allergies. He recently served on the AACC 21st Century Commission on the Future of Community Colleges, and he now serves on the CCCSE National Advisory Board. So I hope you'll take a minute and join me in welcoming our distinguished panel. And then we are going to jump right in. So I'm going to start with Jim. And Jim, since the PCAST report, Engage to Excel, was released in early 2012, there's been an incredible response across higher education communities as well as in the policy community. Might you reflect on how and why this report is driving so much change across the higher ed landscape?
Thank you, Susan, and good morning to everyone. This report, Engage to Excel, was released in February of 2012, and I was looking at my records, and I've basically been asked to speak on average twice a month for the entire 31 months since its release. So it's actually been quite remarkable to me that the report has had the impact that it has, apparently. Today is another manifestation of the reception that the report has received. And I do have to tell you that when we initiated the report, we had some reticence, because at the time, it typically takes about 2 years to complete one of the long-form PCAST reports. And so we actually began the report in 2010, right after our report on K-12 education. And at the time, we didn't see anyone talking about the first 2 years of post-secondary education as a place where some special attention might be beneficially spent. I do have to tell you that one of the things about PCAST reports is they are recommendations to the president, but we are very much aware that there's a much larger audience that reads these reports and takes direction from them. So in thinking about this report, I was, as Dr. Holdren mentioned, I carry the portfolio of STEM education on PCAST to a large degree. And so we knew that we wanted to complete a second report after the first, and we knew that it had to be on college, but where was the question. And so one of the things that went through our minds is, if you think about the traditional picture of the leaky pipeline, where might we get one of the biggest payoffs, biggest bang for the buck for the investment? And if you look at the statistics, one of the places is right after high school. And so it was an opportunism that directed us to think about this initially, how to write a report that would have an impact because it could make an effective difference. Of course, there's also, as you heard, the issue about workforce development. And we went to our friends in the Bureau of Labor Statistics and Tony Carnevale at the Georgetown Institute to try to find out what was the country's configuration. And there is a short-term risk. So the thing that's really interesting about the Engage to Excel report is that it really was not meant to be only about education, but it was supposed to be filling in the country's needs. So we, after our initial period of trepidation, were utterly amazed at the reception. And I wish I could take credit for it, saying that PCAST is what waved a magic wand and suddenly the country understood, oh yeah, the first 2 years after high school, that's where we ought to concentrate our attention. That's not my perception of what had happened at all. We raised the issue, but I think there was a receptivity, a pregnancy of the idea that already existed in society, and we just happened to be one of the people, one of the groups that were enunciating this point. Let me pay special tribute to someone here in the audience. I'm going to embarrass her a little bit. Dr. Danielle Carnival, who is now currently a member of the OSTP, of the White House staff, was in fact one of the main drivers on this report also. So although John likes to point his finger at me, I point my finger at Danielle. And I had three terrific co-chairs, Chad Mirkin, who's another PCAST member, Joe Handelsman, who now works in OSTP, and Peter Lepage of Cornell. So this was the leadership. So what have I seen since the report came out? Well, I'm going to give you a few vignettes and then try to sit down, and I'm happy to go and engage further. So one of the interesting things is that I saw was the response from a group in New York. Now, there's a community college there called Rockland County Community College. Some of you may or may not have heard of it. And I was asked to come and speak there shortly after the report was released, and I was amazed at what was going on. It's one of the best examples I've ever seen of the alignment between university, employers, and government engaged in trying to figure out how to create an effective pipeline for the students to be trained and to have jobs. The employers in particular, there was one employer that impressed me most. There's a company called Regeneron. It was it received an award as being the fastest growing company in New York. And to actually see the interplay between this great corporate citizen investing time, energy, employees' times into the system was an amazing thing to see. It's a model I'd like to see brought to scale much more vigorously than I see around the country. So that's one that I really like to highlight. The AAU now has a focus on first 2 years of education, a program that I actually know about. I'm an advisor. I have various friends in the audience, including my friend Peter Bruns, and we are actually trying to look over the shoulder of AAU as it looks through the consortium of universities who are thinking about how to transform the first 2 years of education. There are obviously a limited amount of funds in that program, but that's again a program that I would say keep an eye on because it provides a model, something that you may be able to bring to scale in your local community. I have to tell you that one of the things that really surprised me about our PCAST reports is really how far they do reach. I have an international part of my career too, and believe it or not, there were people, I have met people, and I've been most impressed by the Koreans, because they're asking, what are you Americans doing about STEM education and its interface in terms of workforce? Now, you all know that Korea is one of our main competitors. And so if they're interested in what we're doing, then it means that we think that it augurs well for putting America in a leadership position. Another example that I'd like to talk about is in the report, we called out one community of our colleagues, and I have a representative of that group here sitting in the audience, Professor Denny Gulick, who's one of my colleagues at College Park, as well as my colleague Uri Treisman. Our report, in some pretty hard language, harsh language you might even say, called the mathematicians to task, that you've got to step up to make a difference, because our view was that unless the mathematicians did their role, their part, probably the rest of it was a real long shot. To my great and utter surprise, the mathematics community has stepped up to this. There is currently a group called Transforming Post-Secondary Education in Mathematics. Uri is a member of that, of the leadership of that group. I'm on the committee. I was drafted. I like to tell people I'm a fallen mathematician because, in fact, my first undergraduate degree is in mathematics.
He always falls on a trampoline.
Eric Friedlander, the former president of the American Mathematical Society. Mark Green, a leader responsible for writing an NRC report, Math 2020. Tara Holm, Cornell University, leader of AMS educational activities. And then Phil Griffiths, who is the emeritus director of the Institute for Advanced Studies in Princeton. Phil recently received an award, not for his work on public service, but for his outstanding work in topology, an area in mathematics. And so what we've seen among the math community, which to me is the most shocking outcome of our report, is that the community obviously had, prior to the report, a consciousness about this. And I think our report, and maybe Uri will speak to this a bit in his comments, but I think that our report not only activated sort of folks like you, but in particular, it activated the mathematicians to a level I have never seen before in my life. So I am encouraged that the report has actually had an impact across a number of scales. I could name a number of other things, but I think my 6 minutes is about up. And as I said, I'm perfectly willing to talk to people at length about the things that I've seen, because being an author of the report, people call you to show and tell, so to speak. So thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to our later exchange. I'm sorry. There is one other thing I wanted to add. It had a personal impact on me. Last spring, I wrote a research paper with a student who transferred from Montgomery Community College. It can be done, folks. Community college students can do research.
Thanks, Jim. We're going to switch gears to Susan. So Susan, you and your team from your time at Carnegie Mellon captured and translated decades of research on learning into 7 research-based principles in how learning works. How can and ought these underlying principles drive instruction in undergraduate learning environments, whether we're talking about bricks and mortar classrooms, field-based learning, or this brave new online world?
Well, thank you, and it's good to be here with all of you this morning to talk about something that's very near and dear to my heart. And I think actually there's a lot of good news, and I think I want to start by saying that I got into STEM education, in fact, because very early on in my career as a graduate student, I recognized through several of my mentors how important the research on learning was, and the fact that back then it wasn't being translated into digestible pieces that people could actually concretely act upon. So I was a graduate student at Carnegie Mellon in history. I was teaching intro courses to students who were forced to take history, who were in fact STEM students, and I was struggling not only with their motivation, but also with a lot of misconceptions, preconceptions they held about my field. And so I was gently coerced by one of my colleagues in the history department to saunter over to the psychology department, which was and still is heavily focused on cognitive psychology, to interact with a man, Herb Simon, who later became a mentor of mine. And when I told Herb I was really struggling with teaching my students well, that is, getting them to learn, I was sent. I didn't really know who he was or what he did, but I trusted my advisor. He gave me a stack of papers and said, here's some research on learning, and it's good stuff. You should go and you should read it. You should come back, and then let's talk about how you're going to redesign your course. So I went and I read it, and I came back, and we talked about how I was going to redesign my course. I redesigned my course, and I was amazed at the impact that several of these research findings had on the degree to which I could motivate my students, break through some of those misconceptions, identify them, and get them to, in fact, master the kinds of things that I wanted them to master. I was amazed. And so that started me down a path working with Herb Simon to understand the research on learning. And one of the things he said to me very early on was that there is so much good stuff out there, but at that point in time, the cognitive psychologists only talked to each other. And in fact, applied cognitive psychology was just something people didn't do. It was at that time sort of beneath them. And so he said, we need people who are interested in improving the quality of education that we provide to our students to take this research and help translate it and make it more accessible to people across disciplines. And I thought that sounded very intriguing, and so I began working in that area. And being at Carnegie Mellon, one of the first things I did was go over to the engineering college, because in fact a lot of the research had been done either in areas that focused around engineering, so problem solving, and I wanted to get a sense of what some of my colleagues there thought. And so I started sharing the beginnings of what ended up being these 7 research principles. And to my delight, I found a lot of people in engineering in particular who were interested, intrigued, and actually worked with me to take some of what we knew from the learning sciences and redesign some of their courses, and eventually, in some cases, some of their curricula. And so it became apparent to me that, in fact, this is something that was really important, that we should be talking about more broadly across a lot of institutions and across a lot of areas of a lot of different disciplines. And so I thought the good news back then was that people were receptive, and I think the good news today is that people are still receptive. But when I look at what happened in those 30 years, while I see individuals and I see pockets of wonderful things that have happened, I haven't seen the kinds of systemic changes around what it is we've been doing in designing courses and designing classroom activities, designing online activities that really we should be doing based on what we know in the research. What we know is that learning happens in the minds of the learner, and that the degree to which we're going to have impact on that learning is really the degree to which we can design experiences that actually get students to engage in the behaviors that we know lead to learning. And this morning we heard a little bit about the importance of redesigning, for example, those entry-level courses. There is still across the country this notion that people learn by listening. And we know from the research that people learn what they practice and only what they practice. And yet we still relegate practice to the assignments that students do outside the classroom. And that, in fact, is what the whole flipped classroom movement is about. It's let students read and hear and listen the things that they can do outside the classroom, bring into the classroom the thing that is most important to engage students in learning, and that is the practice. Do it in real time, where we as the instructor can probe students, where we as the instructor can identify when we hear misconceptions. We can deal with those misconceptions so that learning can occur. And so this principle of students learn what they practice and only what they practice, combined with feedback, becomes incredibly important. One of the other things that I learned very early on, that I think all of us know at some level, is that students come into any learning environment with a whole lot of information, with prior knowledge that is not only information and skills, but also beliefs and attitudes, and that all of those things combined are the lens through which people take in new information. And if they take in information that is in dissonance with what it is they already know, that becomes a very difficult situation, and we know learners often reject if they hold something that's wrong really deeply. And so how many of us in our learning activities, in the opportunities, the courses, whether they're online, on-site, or hybrid, how many of us begin each course trying to determine what students know, what's accurate, what's appropriate, what's sufficient, and what is activated? Because if any of those 4 states are in flux, if students are holding beliefs or information that are not accurate, that are not sufficient, that are not activated, learning isn't going to occur, or it's going to be such a struggle that students turn away. So how many of us figure out where it is students really are and then meet them where they are, not where we wish they should be? That's something that we could be doing systematically in every single course, in every single university across the country, that would have a huge impact to understand where students were, where those misconceptions are, where there's insufficient knowledge, and then begin there. And yet something as simple as that we don't do, not in a systematic way. And so I think I want to end by simply saying that it really isn't rocket science, but what it takes is much more purposeful and intentional design of learning activities, which means we have to get the information out there, and then we have to allow our faculty the time to actually engage in the redesign. I think I'll end there, and I'm happy to go deeper on any of those issues.
Thank you, Susan. Bill, UMBC inspires all of us. How have you been able to collectively accomplish this culture shift that ensures the success of all students? And what is it that the rest of us could learn from you?
Thank you, Susan. And I'm definitely honored to be here on such an esteemed panel. And you just mentioned the secret sauce. And I think the secret is that there actually is no secret to it. The question, it's great to talk to a room of scientists and people with STEM backgrounds, because the question I wrestled with when I was asked to be on the panel is what we come across all the time. Is it nature or is it nurture? Is it something so unique to UMBC that it's in our genes and it's not in someone else's? Or is it something that's been nurtured by qualities that are in every one of us? And all the people that sit in this room and across the same carrying the levels. And that's the question I tried to answer to myself and put in this 6-minute, hopefully, talk together. So one could say UMBC started off with very fertile grounds for culture change, to be part of our genetic makeup. Born in the 60s, the world was changing all around us. We had a purpose of inclusion. We were supposed to be supplying students to professional schools downtown. Financial aid was becoming more prevalent, and the baby boom, knowing it very personally, was bearing the fruit. Right? And high-quality faculty came to a new place with dreams and hopes. And the students came here, I guess they were just taking a chance of what was going to happen on this newly devolved campus. Critical decisions were made along the way and carried to fruition by President Freeman Hrabowski. And when I interviewed here in '92, I was glad to see there was a person that thought just like me. But the fact of the matter is, we are blessed to have such a leader, such a stable leadership for so long, because it helps you build the critical mass of thinking and the culture of the campus to a large degree. He's a model of inclusion, support, advancement, innovation, and vision. But more importantly, he's a person that you can walk with. You have similar values, and you choose to work with him, and you choose to work for him. And I believe the greatest innovation that changed this culture was that of the Meyerhoff program. And I believe it lies at the core of a lot of the accomplishments that followed thereafter. It started with a problem that was, let's go for the low-hanging fruit. So let's start with STEM education and emphasize African-American students. It was not easy. It was something that within our campus and outside, people believed this was not going to happen. It wasn't possible. But he established support in STEM. He established a community as a means of support for students, a network of friends, mentors, future colleagues. It changed the way we looked at people. Were we going to look at them in a deficit-based model? Or would we look at them from the strengths that they bring to the table? We accomplished these goals by bringing everyone together in the university and people from the outside. It was a goal for a greater good. That's what brings people together. That's what makes success, just like everybody sitting in this room. And the program was assessed, evaluated, refined over and over again. The data was not just to convince you and others, but it was also to convince ourselves that we were successful in what we were doing, that it could be accomplished. This was the start of the culture of assessment on UMBC's campus. The Meyerhoff program shows that we could do it, and we could change, as our provost talks about all the time, the norm. That's what culture change is all about. And many programs that there followed build off this model of working across the disciplines, working across the units, building community, starting with the lead innovators. I could point to the gender equity for faculty women with the advanced program, or entrepreneurship as a mindset for students and faculty. Go out and start a business. Be part of the 100 bio startup companies, the life science companies we have across the way. Or more recently, innovations in teaching and learning. It's really about looking in the mirror and accepting the responsibility. We cannot think that a student's success, a failure, is a student's success for us. Weeding out is not a process. Students are not weeds. You don't pull them out of the garden. Everyone is in there for a purpose, right? Their failure is our failure, and everyone's failure is society's loss. So shifting culture, changing norms. Meyerhoff exemplified this. But some of the keys to what we've developed on this campus, and I know it happens on other campuses as well, is the mindset of not to blame someone for trying, not to blame someone. There is no blame for trying and even failing. Entrepreneurs do it all the time. They fail serially, but they learn from each experience to go forward and reward innovation, incentivize faculty who tried, and turn and get evidence to back up, to convince others, and to convince ourselves. The chemistry discovery says, so when students were failing in chemistry, I was fortunate to be in a position to be in a university that allowed me to try something different. Let's get rid of discussions. That was the old ways. Let's get the students into group learning. Was it new? Not really. NSF had been funding these things for years. It was out there. It was evidence-based. It should work. And what we did was we started group work. We built the community, principles from the Meyerhoff, sharing responsibilities through active learning. We cut the failure rate in freshman chemistry in half while raising standards. But these were lessons from Meyerhoff's. But the vision was to take Meyerhoff to every student that entered in our doors at UMBC. And when transfer students were not persistents, we had to step back and rethink our relationship with the community colleges, our partners. There's Sanjay down there. What did we first do? We came up with a novel approach. We talked. We hadn't sat down with them for years, right? We didn't know what they were doing. What was the expectation between the partners? And the talking led to the fact that there are no differences in the science teachers there and the ones at UMBC. There's no addition in the passion, the knowledge, and the caring. And we know accreditation keeps us on board along the same lines. So it was just misalignments that originate because differences happen over time. And their students now are our students, and our students are their students, and it's an inclusive alliance for student success and support. We've taken the Castle, a teaching learning facility, built to extend the active learning to other disciplines, mathematics, the Retrieval Learning Center, built with the help of the students, the Science Learning Collaboratory, psychology courses, innovation, writing labs. It's a wave that has crossed the campus because we support the faculty, we support the students in our goals as we go forward. And what we're trying to clarify, I think, more recently, and this is my own opinion, is what Ed Vinette from the Education Advisory Board called the murky middle. I'd hate to be a student that's being classified being in the murky middle. And I think what our job here is to try to clarify that middle, to make it more transparent. And so the IQ project from the NSF with random control products, it's a difficult project. If you want to hear more about it, Philip will be glad to talk about it to you. The Gates T-SIM project about building partnerships with community colleges. The Nexus from HHMI, partnerships of sharing that has now taken the Meyerhoff program, what we've accomplished, to University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and to Penn State. And at the heart of all of these things that we talk about, it's not UMBC doing it alone. It is a partnership based on trust, respect, integrity, shared values, common goals, and respect. Partners willing to help with the visions. Partners in people, as Mr. Meyerhoff, and donors. Partners in government, partners in industry, partners in foundations. Whether it's the PCAST report, the Gather and the Storm, or I like the NRC report, Research Universities and the Future of America. It's a partnership for and of innovation. So here at UMBC, I think that some of the secret sauce, if it's secret at all, and this is how I'll close, is that we've made a partnership with our faculty. Our shared governance is strong, and they feel the support that if they want to try something different, they will be supported from the highest levels of this administration and from down into their departments. I think we've also, more importantly, we've made a partnership with our students, whether they be coming in as native students or through transfers. The students that enter our doors, they come in with hopes, dreams, and yes, they come in with fears as well. And often STEM courses, they fear the most. And how they persist is going to depend how we perceive them. I'm a student from a two-year college, and I've made it to a place I never thought was possible growing up. And we also think they succeed by how they are treated subsequently. So every student is an investment tomorrow. And my conclusion in the end It's not the nature. It's not born in the genes. All we did was nurture qualities that every university, every college, every higher education person believes in. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Bill. Joel, your provost at Johns Hopkins has seeded and nurtured a very grassroots approach to STEM education reform that you and your colleagues have implemented. What can you share with us about how to implement change at the scale you've been succeeding at Hopkins?
Thank you, Susan. About 4 years ago, our president, Ron Daniels, and the then provost, Lloyd Minor, started focusing the collective attention of the faculty on these introductory courses that, in the sciences and the math areas. Those courses that are the gateway courses, and this is the name of the initiative, the Gateway Sciences Initiative. They're the gateway to more advanced studies in the disciplines. So we know that these courses have a disproportionate impact on students and their subsequent studies, but despite that, and despite the volumes of research on teaching and learning, what they pretty quickly realized was that much of these courses were standard lectures, standard exams, and in the labs were standard cookbook sorts of experiments. So to jumpstart our efforts, and this was coming out of the provost office and was spearheaded by the then vice provost for research, Scott Zeger, included multiple efforts. And one of these were a couple of symposia where we had leaders across the country come in and discuss some of these innovations in education, specifically in STEM. But another was to run a competition. And so if you ask, what does it take to help facilitate this change, I would say, well, it doesn't hurt to throw some money at it. We had 2 rounds. We had the provost committed $1 million in each one of these rounds. And we asked for proposals for faculty across the divisions to put forward ideas and budgets for things that could be done within their introductory courses to help facilitate these changes. Now, there were a couple of requirements. One is that the proposals had to make reference to the educational literature, so this wasn't somebody's sort of 2 a.m. thought. These were things that were grounded in what we knew about teaching and learning. And importantly, they had to include an assessment plan. Now, one of the things that became very apparent in this, at least from my position, and I'm somebody who was participating, but I was not an administrator or a director within this effort. One of the things that became very clear to me, and this is a note to all administrators out there, one thing you must absolutely do is unleash your faculty. If you go down the list of ideas that were funded, initiatives that were started, it reads like the list that came out of PCAST. We had efforts to diversify the curriculum so that students who came in perhaps underprepared mathematically would have help in the more quantitative aspects in chemistry problem sets. But we also had special courses for students who came in with AP credit but may not have had great lab experiences. We had things that helped build communities. There was a wildly successful program with the acronym PILOT, Peer Instructor-Led Training and Learning. And in that, trained student facilitators would take 6 or 10 students in STEM courses through problem sets. We found out that the interaction between the students as they worked toward these goals was something that they were desperate for and something they actually demanded in terms of wider investment and wider opportunity. Active learning, we ended up with the physicists producing an intro-level physics course that was essentially all active learning, for example. And my own little piece here, and I just do this as a shout out to Wanda Jordan, who's in the room. my own little bit was to bring the CPhages lab course that was funded by HHMI and directed for many years by Tawanda to Johns Hopkins, where it has been remarkably successful. So, benefits from the approach. Because these ideas came from the faculty, there was a champion in the room. This wasn't sort of unhinged from regular curricular developments. The faculty, of course, had to vet it with a chair, and then in turn with the dean. There had to be a letter of support at both levels. But you had somebody who really wanted to make this work. Another thing that was really important was that they all included assessment, and it got our faculty thinking in terms of assessing their courses, not merely handing out grades, but figuring out what made things work and how their students were learning. One of the things that I would have to say, though, in terms of the challenges that resulted from this approach is that institutionalization of these efforts is an ongoing effort. In short, be careful what you wish for. As I mentioned, this pilot, this group learning initiative, it was an add-on, right? It didn't replace any of these courses. It was added in to chemistry courses and physics courses and math courses. The students loved it so much, they wanted to form their own groups if we weren't going to offer them. It turns out that was quite an investment, and you know, you want to drive a dean insane, go into an office and ask for $500,000. So I think I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Uri, we've heard about wonderful innovations. We have a room full of innovators. We have lots of data, as we've been hearing, and we're all challenged to bring this to widespread practice. What can we learn from you, from all of your work at transformation at the state and the system level?
What a setup. So as a room of scientists like you, I'm less interested in my successes than in the problems I have to work on next. Right? And I want to talk about some of those. So first, the problem is not really one of lack of innovation or basic research. We're like really good as a country at innovation and basic research. We're even really good at scaling important advances in some domains. Higher education isn't at the top of that list, right? In part because of the enormous diversity of institutions, diversity of missions, and enormous diversity of governance structures under which they operate. So scaling innovation is particularly tough. And it's also not data. 5 years ago, the ideas we had were mostly polished by hope, but unfettered by evidence. I think it was fair to say. That's not the true now. The CCRC reports, the new National Center for Post-Secondary Readiness, the report that will be released tomorrow by the Community College Survey of Student Engagement, present converging, powerful evidence based on large data sets, quantitative and qualitative studies of which practices actually significantly lead to better student achievement. The question is how we bring it to scale. Right. So I want to talk a little about moving the Statway and Quantway, my love child, with Tony Breik, right, from an effort that serves thousands of students and helps them do better, to an effort, the new Mathways project, that's about normative change in institutional structures and program course offerings. Right. So, first of all, this is not about innovation in individual institutions. My institution, UT Austin, 62% of our baccalaureates last year transferred community college, an average of 9 community college credits. We transferred 80,000 courses last semester to our institution. So this old idea that, you know, national improvement will come from individual institutions working internally is wrong. We actually need mechanisms for sharing responsibility for student development across community colleges, 4-year to 4-year lateral transfers, and so on. So what do we see? So it's been a long walk from home. Designing the Statway which was sort of my longtime vision of my dream of building a statway to heaven for these myriad of students taking stupid math courses when they wanted to be nurses, factoring trinomials till they dropped. Right. It turned out not to be hard to do that. We have 20,000 students in Statway and Quantway, and more than half of it's more than triple the rate of their success in half the time. But it's still a drop in the bucket of the problem we're trying to solve. So the first thing was actually working in a state system, getting all 50 community colleges and four-year institutions to sign a partnership that would lay out the policy rules, right, and the shared expense issues of changing core structures in higher ed. And I'm a pretty conservative guy, actually. I think there should be a high bar for messing with institutionalized structures in higher ed. But here the bar has been met. And the presidents and governing boards needed to make policy decisions that would allow something to grow, otherwise being boutique solutions. What we had seen was that the presidents, because these institutions optimize for legitimacy more than quality in many cases, needed to have one of each. So they had 2 sections of Statway, 2 sections of Emporium, 2 sections of flipped classrooms. And if they didn't have each one of those things, they were subject to being seen as illegitimate by their peers and their funders. Right? Giving up the need to have one of everything is harder than giving up cigarettes. Right? We had to make some priority decisions at a high level, and we had to move with the legislature to wean these programs and institutions from doing innovation on soft money funding. What we had seen is when institutions have grants from Gates or Lumina or Carnegie or Kresge, a handful of faculty jump onto them. Smart administrators isolate those people from the real institutional core structures. And when the funding goes away, the effort disappears virtually always. Probably 80% of the NSF, beautiful things that have been funded, disappear when the NSF funding goes. So we needed to work on getting signed commitments from governing boards to create budget lines for these innovations and legislative appropriations to free them from grant getting and idiosyncratic boutique efforts. We were stunned by the amount of work we had to do in Texas on changing administrative rules, the amount of energy in negotiating rulemaking processes, because our courses didn't fit the college readiness framework that had been established 3 or 4 years ago when college algebra was the normative course. So this is not just about faculty lining up and making better courses. That's necessary but not sufficient. The question from the beginning, if we're going to design at scale, is how do we deal with the policy, enabling policy environment that will allow good things to grow? And then a big surprise was the need for legitimation structures. Because we found lots of department chairs were defending old courses, were defining rigor in terms of course lists from 1948, right? There had been no professional discussion of what constituted rigor or high evidence quality for courses. So this is the work of TIPSY that Jim referred to, our co-conspirators on this, Vision 2025, getting the professional organizations to legitimize the change, to make it a standard for responsible practice. That work has to take place as you try to scale innovations. And it turns out that one of the problems is that the professional societies don't have structures for surfacing consensus, acting on it, and promoting change. Now, some are better than others, but math is not at the top of the list. And thanks to the softball that Jim threw at us in the PCAST report, and we missed, right? It provided the perfect opportunity to get the research leadership of the community together and say this needs to happen. Let's re-examine the structures that we have in the profession for dealing with things of this sort. Mobilization. Making change at scale requires cycles of mutual permission giving. It meant meeting with the presidents, the deans, the provosts, the IR directors, the chairs of the math department, 100 at a time in a big state, in a decentralized system, and synchronizing their work. The administrators were loath to annoy the faculty. The faculty didn't believe they had any communication vehicles with their presidents or governing boards or legislators. Building the structures that allow scaling is a hard part of the work. And last, the Statway and Quantway is remarkably successful, but it's not going to scale. It's not going to scale because it violates what my colleagues derisively call Treisman's second law of educational thermodynamics. Basically, you cannot scale innovations that require more work from busy people. So we had to re-architect a successful initiative and make it lighter in design so that regular mortals, caring mortals, could implement it. And that was very, very risky because we had something which was having dramatically successful rates, and we had to take some risks in guessing what its central organizing principles were that could work across institutions like rural community colleges and flagship research universities. Then the last is once we started having success in Texas in our pilots, the presidents told us they didn't actually need a math solution. They needed a solution to all of gateway courses in developmental education, and the effort had to be subordinate to an effort aimed at improving student achievement. They couldn't manage separate literacy efforts from math efforts, and that becomes the problem we're working on now. So just one final comment. This is supposed to be about commitments we made at previous meetings. Tomorrow we're meeting with senior leadership teams from 6 states, right, to replicate the Texas New Mathways project. And we're trying to learn these lessons of scaling at the outset. Who is it who actually needs to do the work? What is the team that you put together that has access to governance, to senior administration, to our industry partners, to the core instruction of departments to put this together? And where should it be situated in leadership? Those are the problems that the states trying to learn from this are wrestling with at the outset. It's not just about liberating the faculty to do wonderful things without any reasonable support for them. Poof, you're an innovator. This has to be part of a coherent system, a beneficial virus, culturing change in higher education. And that means thinking through the rituals, routines, and structures we're building on which, like UMBC, you will get a changed culture. The work is a bitch, but it's necessary.
So we have a few minutes before we take a deep dive into the working groups, and our panelists would be happy to answer questions that you have if you walk to the microphones, and we'll swap from side to side, and we'll try having them speak from where they're sitting so we can move as quickly as possible. If you're having trouble hearing, raise your hand and we'll get them over to the mic. Peter.
Peter Bruns, emeritus at Cornell and formerly with HHMI. Anybody, I would love to hear an example of you of something that works in an important area, I think. If the faculty are a key issue in all of these things, but getting the faculty to teach in good, proper ways is a very difficult thing. But one place to start is with graduate students. So start right from the beginning. Does anybody have any good examples of really organized graduate training programs that bring graduate students into proper ways of teaching?
Well, I can just say very briefly that we began a future faculty program at Carnegie Mellon before anybody was funding future faculty programs. It was back in 1987, 1988. And one of the things that we said to graduate students is if you're interested in being a professor, a huge part of what it is you'll be doing is teaching. We know all of this research on learning. And I will tell you from that time through today that the majority of people who are involved in that program are graduate students from STEM fields who know, in fact, that they want to be faculty. And we've created a program that is easy for them to engage in, and we continually went out to them to ask for the kinds of things that they would be able and willing to do given the schedules that they have. So I know a lot of institutions have courses that graduate students take. That was something that in our culture that wasn't going to work. And so we listened very carefully, and over a 5-year period of time, we created a whole variety of different kinds of opportunities, different lengths of time, different times of the year, different foci, and over that 5-year, 6-year period that students are there, we allow them to engage in that, we document that, and then eventually they end up with not just documentation of what it is they've done, but they end up with some concrete things that they can walk out the door with and they can use during interviews. And so part of what we require in that program is that they design a course, getting feedback from the faculty as well as the learning scientists, that they design some prior knowledge probes, some activities, so they have something very concrete to take into an interview in their first job.
Okay, Yuri wants to go, and I just wanted to also mention the CERTL program, the Center for Integration of Research and Teaching and Learning at the University of Wisconsin at Madison and Michigan State, that's now scaled to 23 Research One universities. Ann Austin and Bob Matthews have provided incredible leadership there. They're developing professional development MOOCs that are being shared across these universities, but I think more exciting than anything is the research that's showing that the graduate students and postdocs that go through that program, when they end up in faculty positions, are much more likely to effectively use these evidence-based practices in their classrooms. So there's really terrific evidence that this works. But Uri wanted to chime in.
Peter, I want to reinforce. So I've been leading statewide groups of math chairs, Georgia, Ohio, Texas, Washington. And it's stunning to me how few of them actually know what jobs their doctoral students are getting 3 or 4 years after finishing. And in a few places where they've worked on this earnestly, they've discovered most of their faculty are teaching, some are working in industry, some have left the field. And when they try to improve their programs, the faculty don't actually know anything about work in those jobs. So this is a really challenging question. But I just want to say that for freshman instruction, and particularly in community colleges, 2/3 of the faculty of enrollment is now taught by contingent adjunct workers making $700 on average a credit. They're not paid to participate in improvement activities. So we've created an apartheid system that is a massive impediment to scaling innovation. As we move to teaching faculty who are not paid to participate in improvement, that has an extraordinary conservative force on the curriculum.
So I'm going to ask, in the interest of time, if the two folks that are over by the microphone could each state your question, and after they've been stated, if we could just briefly have a couple panelists respond, and then we'll move on to the working sessions.
Hi, I'm Lee Baker. I'm Dean of Academic Affairs at Duke University. And my question is about culture. There's been a lot of discussion about institutional culture, but one of the struggles I've found is the so-called culture of the curve. And so really smart students in the bottom third of the class that are inspired and interested in science really cannot fulfill their excitement because they sort of get crushed by the curve. And with all the assessment and learning outcomes, is there scenarios where you can say, if you achieve these learning outcomes, you get a B or you get an A? I'm just curious if there's programs out there that have really sort of mitigated that culture of the curve.
Thank you, and then we'll take the second question, and then we'll ask our panelists to briefly respond to both.
Well, luckily, my question is a follow-on to the previous question. My name is Beth Ambos, and I'm Executive Officer of the Council on Undergraduate Research. And of course, research-based teaching is one of our major foci, which is what progress in evaluations of learning goals are really demonstrating instruments for measuring cognition gained by research-based courses, particularly in the first 2 years. So cognition, not affect.
Can I speak to that? So to both of the questions, let me just say, one of the things that Advisor Holdren mentioned was the whole issue of assessment in terms of possible opportunities in using IT for this purpose. And the whole gaming, I mean, it sort of went by really fast, but the whole point of the comment about gaming, at least one of the major points about gaming, is that it is a almost constant assessment feedback cycle going on. That the person engaged in the gaming gets the assessment almost in real time, which is then used to modify their acquiring of mastery. And so a lot of us have thought about, can we take that aspect of gaming to education, so that it gets a little bit at this question of the curve, because what's going on is that you have people progressing in their mastery at, if you have sophisticated, and this is of course the trick, is to write the sophisticated software that would do this, but to have an individualized, sophisticated tutor that can allow people through different learning styles to make progress, which we think is the potential out there. So IT holds this promise. We're at the very beginning of looking at this, but this is one of the things that we thought about a lot.
Anyone else like to make a closing response? Uri.
Many of my colleagues and I have moved from a curve to a point system in which students have some choice in how they acquire their grades. Although this needs further study, it's I'd say it's a practice worthy of attention by the field and worthy of study. And second, there's a lot of talk of research-based practices in teaching. What we learned from the National NSF-funded Calculus Project was that innovative instruction done poorly has adverse effects on student learning. Big time. So piece A is what should be the scholarly base of pedagogy. Piece B is what capacities are necessary to implement it with good results and doing no harm. The second part is usually forgotten about.
Can I just add something very quickly that connects these two? And that's what, the other thing that's powerful about the game, besides the feedback in real time that allows you to assess what you've done and change your behavior, is you clearly know what the goal is. You know what you're ending toward. And I would unfortunately say that if you look at the majority of faculty syllabi today, you would still see people aren't very good at articulating what those outcomes are, where they want students to go. And so it's very hard to get there if you don't know where you want it to go. It's not that we as faculty build courses not knowing where we want to go. It's just that we don't articulate them in a way that's student-centered and measurable.
And I think at a policy level, right, the recent shift in the Department of Education in terms of accreditation from strictly Carnegie hours to competency-based education paves the way for us to move forward, thinking about Uri's comments about a more system-wide effort. So I think we need to stop here. And Peter, do you want to let us know about where to go for our breakout groups?
Right.
First of all, thank you, Susan, and the panel for the great discussion. Terrific panel, great experts. We know that everybody here actually is an expert in one aspect or another of the work that we're talking about today. So the next session is actually a working session. We'll be going into breakout groups. We're going to first take a break. The break will be exactly 9 minutes. It's 11:06, and 11:15, we want everybody to get into one of the 4 breakout groups, and they are as follows. So breakout group number 1 is on college preparation, bridge courses, and outreach, and that will be down the hall in room 310. Breakout group number 2 is providing a foundation in mathematics. That will be here in the ballroom in this area right back here. Next to it will be breakout group number 3, improving undergraduate STEM pathways and careers. So that's over in this corner. And breakout group number 4, innovation in undergraduate STEM teaching and learning, will be also down the hall in room 312. So we'll be in the breakout groups from 11:15 to about 12:30. At that point, come back here. We'll reconvene here in the ballroom. We will have lunch. You'll be actually getting lunch through these doors over to the side here. So go through there, pick up your lunch, and bring it back to the ballroom. We'll have about a half an hour to gather and have lunch, and then we will go into the afternoon sessions at that point. So again, quick break. We've got now 8 minutes. At 11:15, we'll get going with our discussions. Thanks.